item is to receive apologies for absence. I don't believe we have any. And the second item to approve the minutes of the meeting held 7th of November. Were there any questions on the minutes? Okay, well, I'm happy to propose that they're approved. And that's seconded by Richard. And I presume everyone in favour. Public questions and statements. I don't believe we've received any public statements. And nothing you want to say now. Items of urgent business, we don't have any that I know. Declarations of interest. Lucy?
Yeah, just for transparency, I'm part of North Walsham Phoenix Group, where we received a building improvement grant in relation to item 13. I know it's not the same situation. I just want to make that obvious. And I'm also the County Council for North Walsham East, and these are largely highways improvements.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Anyone else? No, okay. Member questions. Don't know if anyone wants to ask anything now. No. Okay. Recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Dixon, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I can confirm that there are no recommendations from the November meeting of Overview and Scrutiny that are relevant to Cabinet today.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Item 8, fees and charges. Eric, can you introduce us, please?
Thank you, Chairman. In moving these recommendations is a standard agenda item at this time of year. We have to bring it ahead of the budget meeting in February in order that any changes that need to be made can take place. The report that's in front of you sets out those charges matters which are the responsibility of the district and those which are the responsibility of the government. We don't have complete control over this. There's just one thing I'd like officers to relook at before it goes to full council on page 47, the designation of car parks in Sheringham. My understanding is that Station Road in Sheringham is a resort car park and Chequers is a coastal car park.
Okay.
And that was approved at Budget Council in February, that change.
All right. Okay. If we're happy to take those away, were there any questions on this item, please? No. Okay. So, fairly modest, really, in terms of the scale of changes here. And I'm happy to propose that it's approved, seconded by Richard, and all of those in favour, please. Unanimous, thank you. Item, 9 is the Treasury Management half-year report. Eric, are you able to?
Yes, I just move this report. This is a standard requirement that we have to produce this report. For those members that are interested in cash movements in this authority, if you look at page 58, that will provide a good narrative of movements of cash, short-term borrowing and so on. But it's a standardized report and I simply move the recommendations.
Okay. Well, good to see the gold rating on the financial strength and a good report here by James. I'm happy to. Did you propose it was approved?
I propose that.
Second that. All of those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you again. Item 10 is managing performance for the second quarter, which some of the events in this quarter obviously seem quite a long time ago now, but they were obviously of national importance as well as local importance. Some of the work the council has done, the housing at Ashmanal, the levelling up bids, of course, which we're still waiting for the outcome of. You see there's some affordable housing delivered in South Reps that was approved before the the advent of nutrient neutrality to North Norfolk. So, but it's welcome all the same, despite any obviously being a small number, but it's all very good. Lots of work obviously done within this quarter towards the preparation of future projects, but also the progression of those that are existing or already underway. I don't necessarily have any more to say, but I'm happy to take questions from anyone that has them on this item. The only thing I did want to point out is page 95, the pie chart on the climate, coast and environment. I think we might have a data issue there again. It just seems like half of that chart has turned purple again, which we discussed at the previous meeting. I think there was a data sort of translation issue there, but something we can resolve in future. Yeah, Eric, go ahead.
Yes, just one minor correction on page 99. It talks about the toilets in Fakeling being due to be completed by June 22. I wish that was the case.
So you get the toilets off.
By gosh, what you can find when you just want to dig up a bit of land. But it's probably we're talking about June 23, so that could be corrected.
Yeah.
The Wells toilet should be finished very shortly.
Yeah, okay.
And there will be a handover.
Thank you, Aaron. Go ahead, Angie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little disappointed on these tables under climate, coast and the environment, that there is no table for the coast.
Okay,
I know that my team are working extremely hard on time and in a professional manner, but it would be nice to see it in the table.
yeah, okay. Thank you, Angie. Steve, go ahead.
This is an exceptions report, Chair. Obviously, there have been feedback through overview and scrutiny committee at the length of these reports. So there's a positive that there isn't a specific reference to the coast here because everything is on track. So there is commentary as to the progress made in terms of the Munsley and Cromer coast protection schemes that are still in the detailed phases of development. And there is commentary also about the work that's been progressed with CTAP, but this is an exceptions report, and that's the reason there isn't a specific reference. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I had read the text and was quite pleased with what I saw.
Can you advise, is that going back to ONS at any point soon? I know they recently had the presentation, didn't they? Is that likely to happen again? And is it an annual basis or is it a sort of quarterly? I'm not sure how we're progressing with that.
Oh, it's okay, I can deal with it.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, for some time, we have in the coastal department wanted to spread the word of how good we are
Absolutely.
through the council, and at long last we were finally able to present to overview and scrutiny in the November meeting, so that you know, there was a wider spread across the district of what we're doing and how we do it.
Yeah, okay, well, it was welcome, thank you. Okay, so I'm happy to support the recommendations. Is that seconded by Lucy, and presume all of those in favour? Yep. Thank you, unanimous. Item 11 is the cost of living summit and proposed future actions. So again, you know, we wanted to thank officers from across the organisation for contributing to this event in various different ways, and of course we had the benefit of all sorts of expertise from the organisations that came along and contributed as well. We thought that was really valuable, and we feel we've learned quite a lot from it. So astounding level of response really in such a short time. So, you know, commendable that the staff have managed to achieve that for us. It really assisted with this work. Some key findings, I suppose, that 60%, I think it was, of people wouldn't necessarily have known where to go. So I think, you know, certainly something we need to continue to do is keep up that communication. And, you know, obviously we've had that in the Outlook magazine that's gone out this quarter. But there'll be more work to do, I think, certainly on that front. It's something certainly we can do. You're aware, of course, we contributed some money towards the food bank, so there's a financial element to this as well. And you know, our eyes and ears are open to the challenges as they emerge and develop. The community connectors, of course, are very busy at the moment supporting the warm hubs that have been popping up across the district. Very welcome. I think there are in excess of 20 across the district now. Yes, I think there are 20 on the map, but I think there may be more, in fact. But we're obviously trying to support all of those groups. So lots of work being done, and I think we remain flexible. You know, I think that's a position of strength for this, and if we need to do other things in future to respond as the winter progresses and as this cost of living crisis and inflation crisis progresses, we will do our utmost. Karen, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say further to that?
What came out of the cost of living summit, so in terms of the things that were suggested by the partners that were in attendance. So most of these things we probably can do without any additional resource. So we will be moving forward with those. We have got a cost of living themed group within the council. So we'll be looking at what we do internally, and then we will also be having further engagement with our community partners as well to look at what we can do in partnership. But there are some other issues that we might want to consider that where we'd have to then look to see whether how we resource those things, whether or not there's a piece of work we want to do in terms of food hubs in particular, where we've been asked to provide some financial support. It's quite a significant amount of money that is being sought by the food hubs. So I think that does warrant some time to really explore whether that is the most cost-effective and sustainable option for us as a council to pursue.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had I've seen your indication, John. We've had a sort of offline discussion about this this morning. I think members, you know, want to make a decision carefully and take some time to consider. So we will obviously be looking at the existing provision in Wells and what maybe can be achieved across the district. So, you know, in time we will obviously seek to do that. But as you say, it is quite a significant contribution of money that's being requested for the district project rather than the county-wide project, and something we would need to consider quite carefully before committing to. So yeah, certainly something we will look at further in due course. I've got, if I can go to John and then Lucy, go ahead.
Yeah, mine's not so much a question. I'd just like to say that I'm always amazed at the agility of officers. They've adapted to COVID, getting short notice bids in, the cost of living crisis, and I think they do great work in adapting to the things that come to us and doing a really great job. And I just wanted to add that, if I could, to the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, it's appreciated. Lucy, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to echo what's been said today. I'm very grateful that officers took the motion and ran with it in a way that I could never have imagined. So huge thanks come personally from me. I just wanted to highlight that when we did our questionnaire, our survey, it was noted that 66% of people felt that their mental health was being adversely affected by the cost of living crisis. And just so that members are aware, this is filtering down into everybody's life. Last week I came across a lady in her late 70s, early 70s, who I know I've supported in other ways, who had just been prescribed antidepressants because she can't stop crying and she doesn't know what's wrong with her. And the reason she can't stop crying is because she's too fearful to put on her central heating, and she's worrying about how the winter's going to look for her going forward. And she's being medicated against that. So we have members of North Norfolk community, family, who are having to be medicated to get through the cost of living crisis. And that is the most appalling situation that I have ever known. We are medicating against something which we are powerless at the moment to prevent. So I'm just putting out a personal plea that we all look to our communities, because it's not just that people can't be warm, and it's not just that people can't have the things that they want. It's that people are actually struggling to cope emotionally, and that will be a significant problem going forward. Beyond the cost of living crisis, we'll be left with a very poorer in terms of resilient community, and we need to do everything we can do to prevent against that.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, anything, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd also just like to thank the people who made the recording available, because that meant that we all had the capacity to watch this, and I was grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Okay, so thank you again, Karen, for coming to talk to us about this. And obviously a matter we will continue to watch carefully as we move through the rest of the year and into the next. But if we're happy, have we got recommendations on this? Yes, that's to consider further actions and decide. So I suppose just a note for now, but of course there will be likely some more work and consideration here in future. Okay, so item 12, community engagement strategy. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say, Virginia, at all, but I thought this was a fantastic bit of work. Thank you, Stephen, to others that have contributed to it. And Karen, it's really everything that I wanted to see here. So go ahead.
I also would like to praise this as a piece of work. I think it's absolutely excellent. And one of the connections in here and actions in the actions table is the way in which this feeds through into democratic engagement. And that's mentioned at 1.1 and 1.6 of the action table. I think this is really important. When people think that their opinions count and that they are in a community to which they belong, then they're going to participate at a greater level. And I think one of the measurements in here, which is going to be really useful going into the future, is increasing volunteering, and also the work placements that are also mentioned, measuring the work placements as a useful outcome. And I think democratic engagement, volunteering, and finding ways into work, I think these are all great outcomes from an excellent community strategy, communication strategy.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Lucy, do you want to come in?
Thank you. This is predominantly customer focus, and it really does bring the focus back of our customers, who are our residents. And we don't like to think of them as customers, but they are. And we have to make sure that we are really focused on what they want and what their North Norfolk should look like. So a huge thank you to officers. And I remember being in Mr. Hems's office and seeing the big brainstorm on the wall of how this was going to all pull together. So I think you've really effectively put the vision of what we wanted into it. So thank you.
Karen, Steve, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add. Are you happy to?
We had some blue boxes which we hadn't filled in with the text, so I have done that, and I've just pulled together a response which outlines all of the consultation responses we received, because we received some really fantastic consultation responses which were really supportive of the strategy, but promoting some different models of engagement as well. So I think different sectors have different kind of models that they use. So health in particular, suggesting some models, but I think it just will help with our learning of this aspect of work, and that we can develop as. So I think in terms of, it doesn't mean any changes to the strategy as it is, but it's how we then kind of work with partners to deliver this strategy that will be really helpful for. So if you're happy with me to agree those via the portfolio holder, just as minor amendments for the strategy moving forward.
Okay, I think that's acceptable. Yeah, John, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Just a comment on page 143, and it's regarding your North Walsham Heritage Action Zone. I'm sure people are aware there was a report this morning on Radio Norfolk, and while I was driving in, it's interesting that you've got here, you know, it's supported by the local board. I have to say the people I heard on the radio this morning were not very supportive, and I'm sure you're aware of that, and not everyone's going to be happy, but I just think it's something you need to be aware of, that it would appear that there seems to be some problems there, from what I understood from the report anyway, but maybe someone else has a different interpretation.
Thank you, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. I heard that report too. We weren't approached to comment on that particular report. I was supposed to be going on Radio Norfolk after here, but they put it out. Through the four people that were commented, did discuss issues, and we are aware of those, but it's unfortunate that none of the positive people who haven't been affected were interviewed or commented on. A project of that scale is going to cause disruption, and we've minimized that. The footways are being kept open, and it's not entirely down to the HAS. We're seeing businesses suffer all over North Norfolk with issues and downturns of business, but thanks for bringing, I am appreciative of those comments, and I've been in the town talking to people.
Lucy, go ahead.
Sorry, and just to back that up a little bit, the consultation process that came before the current situation was quite extensive in terms of how and when engagement was made. So there were a number of groups formed. There was the business group. I think there was 3 public meetings at the forum. There was a wide range of business meetings during the consultation, pop-up shops, they were everywhere. And to be honest, many people got tired of seeing the HAS team because of how often and how prevalent they were in town. But what isn't noted here is that there was a stakeholder consultation group as well, and that was a wide variation of people from across the town. So whilst I understand that there's a number of people who are repeatedly in the media with the same view, the level of consultation and the community engagement can't be discounted because it did exist. So as an example, I think that is a beneficial example to give. It may not be the one that's supported by the media at the moment, but it was wide enough that people just got tired of being asked their opinions because they were asked so often.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got an indication from Steve. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I think the discussion you've just had as members is the very reason we need a consistent approach and stated approach to our community engagement on these issues. And absolutely, this is about setting out how we consistently undertake at a very high level, undertake our activity along project lines like this. But more importantly, that we learn what the issues are up front from residents. We recognise as well that we're not always going to satisfy everybody, because there will be differences of opinion and views around the benefits and merits of projects. And that ultimately is part of democratic engagement and democratic activity. But ultimately, you understand those very clearly and concisely before we undertake projects such as this, so that you can make informed, as members, you can make very informed decisions in the full knowledge of public sentiment and view. The only other thing I would just finish on in terms of just backing up or supporting what Karen said, I think, you know, we very much, the strategy is the high level document. The action plan is a living and working document. So we will see that change and adapt over time as we complete things and as we look at improving the work we do around community engagement, because we all want to learn and improve the processes that we go through over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. So, sorry, I'm losing my voice all of a sudden. I would propose that we do approve the strategy and the contents of the action plan. Is that seconded? Yeah. And all of those in favour, please. Yeah, that's unanimous, and thank you again. Okay, item 13, the North Walsham Marketplace Improvement Scheme. And I've got both Eric and Richard listed here. I don't know if either of you want to say something to introduce this item.
Thanks, Chair. The paper here is before you. And it's a matter of transparency. I think some of the discussions we just had about the interviews on radio and comments in the press is because we've been transparent and actually put this out into the public arena first. It's also interesting, Lucy's touched on this, that there is a lot of data on the social pinpoint side for this project, indicating the consultations that we carried out and the fact that where people were in favour, and that it wasn't just an issue that we negotiated. We've revised the scheme to accommodate the majority of views. And as Steve said, there will be people that aren't necessarily happy. And we know that there is disruption. I firmly believe in this scheme, and I believe that it's a great sign that the District Council is investing in North Walsham. North Walsham has not had investment for many years. It has brought other businesses to the town. We've seen large businesses on the Citygate site and the Hornbeam Road that have come as a result of the interest shown in the town. And we do have new businesses interested in coming into the marketplace. And we have had recently a couple of open. So yes, we know there are people that are seeing a downturn in business. It's not, and it will have been exacerbated in some point in North Walsham at the moment. But the project I stand by, the short is this budget was drawn up in 2020, and we've had a hard time since. And the cost of living and cost of increasing fuels and materials has not helped. The fact that we managed to buy most of the materials up front and minimise the money we're asking for is now looking at a rise of 18%, and compared with other large projects in and around Kings Lynn, the library side, we're looking there at an increase in 48% of that scheme. So I think it's been well managed. This is a document to show transparency, and I recommend it to the council. Thank you.
Okay. Eric, go ahead.
Yes, Chairman, I'd like to second that. I think we just need to remember why we started on this journey. We started on it simply because the town centre of North Walsham was in decline, and it had been for some time. And the simple fact is that not enough people who live in North Walsham use the town centre, the shops and the businesses, because they don't see that there's an attraction there. And that also extends to visitors who come to North Norfolk. And if you want to arrest that decline, then you actually have to start improving the environment of the town centre, which is what this is about. The second thing is there's been things done there in the past around the Market Cross, around what is now known as the Church Slope, which was just half done. It was penny pinching. And in terms of the Church Slope, we were told that there was good Yorkshire stone that had been laid there. When they actually dug it up to replace it, it all splintered because it certainly wasn't Yorkshire stone. So that's the first thing. The second thing is with this, there is a rumour mill that goes around the town that centres often on a small number of individuals on social media, but actually says things about this project which have no truth in them whatsoever. So just to give you a couple of examples of the travel hub or bus terminus which is now being completed. I had a couple who said directly to me when the works were going on, I don't know why you want to change this. What we had was all right. If anybody had ever stood by the side of the post office at that junction and seen buses queued up there, 3 at a time sometime, thought about the pollution and the safety issues involved, anything had to be better than that. But then it got worse because somebody else said to me, well, we know from drivers from Sanders that they won't be able to turn the buses in there, that they'll hit the bus shelters. Really? Well, of course, county highways engineers, I know can get criticised from time to time, but extensive trials were done to ensure that that would not happen. And of course, since it's been opened, it has not happened. And since that has been opened, it's been welcomed. And all the silly nonsense that goes on behind on the rumour mill has stopped. It is a big improvement to North Walsham. So I just think that that has to be said. And in terms of inflation, one of the things that worries me as the council finance portfolio holder is the escalating construction costs. We've already seen it with 2 projects in Fakenham. There is a project in Kings Lynn for a new library and community hub in the centre, where since the grant was received to assist that project, costs have gone up by 48%. It is extremely worrying. These are cost increases of between 16 and 18%, and they are low compared to some of the figures we are actually seeing. So it is a struggle that not only this council, but all councils are facing in terms of the ever-rising construction costs. And at some point, if they don't stabilise, then many councils' capital programmes are going to be in serious difficulty. And the last thing I will say is this. As a resident of North Walsham, as a family that uses local businesses in shops, we will complete this. We will get it done properly. And I know in 12 months' time, there won't be any more rumours and moans. People will be saying how good this is. So it's on that basis, Chairman, I warmly second this recommendation.
Thank you, Eric. Nigel, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to, much of what I was going to say, Eric's already said, but I would like to say that as a resident of North Walsham for 40 years and having brought my kids up there, and I've seen all the changes that have occurred in the town. I've seen it grow from around 5,000 to its current population. I've seen businesses, major employers close and not be replaced. And during that time, there's been very little investment in North Walsham. And if you go back over the last 10, 12 years or so, virtually nothing has been spent on the town. So it's well overdue a bit of a revamp. The church slope, which is now completed, is absolutely wonderful. And despite all the criticisms when that was being constructed, people are now stopping and saying, oh, how nice it looks. And I've witnessed that just by sitting there and in the shambles, listening to people talking about it, random people. So Eric's right. You know, Alex Ferguson once talked about noisy neighbours, you know, with his Manchester City rivals. But what we're getting here is a few very vocal people in the town who are getting a voice. And it's disappointing that some of the media pick up on a one-sided story, as they have this morning. It would have been much more balanced if they'd have taken another view or spoken to one of us first. But I fully support this today. As Eric says, the transport hub was another project that received intense criticism, but is now warmly welcomed on the site. It's a huge, it's made a big difference to pollution levels, as Eric said, but also congestion in the town is very much reduced. Traffic congestion I'm talking about. And then of course on the back of this we have the Cedars being brought back into life, and new high street approaches as well from the Lokes, from the car parks. So I'm in total agreement with Eric. I think once the project is completed, beds in, I think people will say what a great improvement the whole thing has been. So I'm in full support of this.
Thank you, Nigel. Okay, I had an indication from Councillor Dixon. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll be relieved that my comments don't relate to the merits or the cost inflation aspects of this. But what I do have a number of queries which relate, I would suggest, to the governance and project management aspects of the project. Now, you will know, Mr. Chairman, that Overview and Scrutiny has taken a keen interest in following the progress of this project. And a report came to the September meeting, which for a number of reasons, that report wasn't perhaps quite ready for consideration, but we made recommendations in relation to that initial report to the committee in September. And it came back in October with a substantial paper, which was more informed than perhaps the first one we saw in September. I make particular reference to this because we spent quite some time actually discussing aspects of the material and labour shortages and the cost it rises and how that figured in the risk register of this organisation. And in particular, we were really interested in what the contingency fund comprised of and where did we stand in relation to the contingency fund. And in fact, one of our number was very keen to deep dive into their contingency, that contingency fund, and asked specifically for information. And that information, Mr. Chairman, has not yet been provided to Overview and Scrutiny. Now, that was back in the first week of October. Now, that is a matter of concern to Overview and Scrutiny, because if we are to perform our role and add value in the way that we would want to do, we do need that information. And I have to say that when I saw this paper, it did take me by surprise, to say the least, that a not insubstantial sum of 400,000 was suddenly being asked for, and yet there had been no hint of that requirement back in October. And so the discussion that we had in relation to contingency funding is all the more serious and relevant, I think, in the context of the paper that we have before us today. So I have to say on behalf of the committee that I am concerned that none of this surfaced at that time. Had there been information of that kind, perhaps we might have had a more informed debate at that meeting. But it is a concern for us to be considering such a large sum and for there not to be the kind of notice that we would have expected. So it does pose questions in my mind about governance and project management and the ability to forecast when we have arising a need for such a substantial injection of further funding. So it's from that perspective that I raised this issue. I do have other comments that I would like to add as well, and they relate primarily to, I don't have, and I may have missed it in this paper, but I don't have any sense of what is that 400,000 made up of. And I'd like to know much more about how that comes to pass. And in particular, how has the contingency fund been spent? Because there's no doubt about it, this will now knock a big hole in that business rate retention fund. Now, that my understanding is that's an earmarked reserve, and presumably there are other projects that we have lined up for that funding. So to take 400 of the 600 away does leave a considerable impact, and I don't think that we should not take that into account. So this is about, as I said, governance and project management. So I'll stay my comment at that, but I would appreciate your view on the situation that I outline with regard to overview and scrutiny, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. So I wasn't aware of the information that hasn't been provided back to ONS, so thank you for highlighting that. Are we able to progress that and deliver that to the committee, if that's okay? I don't know if you want to come in now, Rob, and talk about contingency and the use of the £400,000. I do have another indication.
Could I just say that one of the issues that has arisen that when it went to ONS in September, quite a lot has changed politically in the country since September, and interest rates, as we know, and mini budgets and holes have appeared, and that has had quite a dramatic effect. I know Rob has been working with the QSs and has the figures specifically broken down. So I'm happy for Rob to speak if he would like to.
Good morning. In relation to the overview and scrutiny request for contingency, apologies for that. I suppose my only response really is that the scheme began in September. The marketplace scheme works began in September. We've been reviewing things like the assumptions that went into that work about laying rates, the rates at which the paving was going to be laid, for example, and working with our QSs on the client side and on the construction contractor side. We had to reach an agreement about where those assumptions lay. At the moment, actually, it appears that the laying rates that were assumed in the original cost price are about right. All of that sort of detail informs our consideration of contingency. This is a scheme that was a grand sort of master plan exercise that was undertaken for what could be done for North Walsham. We never had a fixed scheme that was designed with a precisely costed and agreed budget. So we've been working along the way essentially to get what we can done within the budget limits. So it's not a project that had a fixed outcome, a fixed design, like a building design with a fixed budget to deliver it. And within that, you build a contingency. It's been a lot more fluid than that, shall we say, because we've been trying to do as much as we can with the funding available. And this report, realistically, I suppose, is the contingency. It demonstrates that we want to do more than the money allows. So I will respond to ONS's request with the budget breakdown that will demonstrate, how this money is allocated and what assumptions have been gone into the costing for the project. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Rob. That's helpful. Lucy and then Christopher.
Just to address Nigel's issue of where the money's going, if you look at 3.6, the final sentence outlines that in reference to 2.4, 2.5, 2.6 and 2.7, if that's helpful. It's not laid out clearly, but if you reference it back, it's there.
Okay, thank you. Christopher, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on the remarks from Councillor Dixon. When it came to overview and scrutiny in September, I was very concerned about the report we got, which seemed to me very much apple pie. It was fairly vague. It was a very wordy report and had no RAG status against any of the work streams, and certainly didn't highlight the risks. Now, there was a generic risk around the costs of the report of the project, but nothing specific. Now, my experience, if you got a major budget shortfall, which is coming down the line, that would be raised a red flag quite early on, saying there may be something here we need to worry about to manage your stakeholders. Then you actually come to the 400k itself. Normally, you'd expect in real depth as to how that is actually calculated. Why do you actually need? How do you actually justify things? And just say there's one line in there which makes reference to the Lokes. Well, fair enough, but you'd expect a lot more of that. And we've got sort of pages of writing here, but I'd expect a good page of writing breaking that 400k down, explaining how that's made up and why it wasn't sort of highlighted earlier than it actually has been. And I think looking at, what's the lessons you learn from reporting like this? It should be done on a RAG status basis. It should be in more detail and probably highlighting the issues and the risks, possibly far more than we've seen. Because like Councillor Dixon, my eyebrows shot up when I read this. It came through. Thank you.
Okay, Richard, go ahead.
I just would summarise by saying, you tank the economy and the risk register will change, and that's really what's happened here.
Thank you. John, oh, sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, I'll let
John,
John go.
just, who's going first? You're both at the same time. Okay.
Well, hey, I mean, all I will say is that this was a budget when it was conceived was in 2019, early 2020, which in terms of the climate we were then dealing with was a fixed budget. We got X amount from Heritage England, Historic England, X amount from the district and X amount from the local strategic partnership. The climate and what has happened since has changed considerably. When we got that, we operated on the assumption that those costs, that those budgets would cover all of the required works. What has happened since means that it can't, even in spite of the questions that have been asked and the work that's been undertaken. So that's the sort of harsh reality. And that's what we're having to deal with. And it's not unique to North Walsham.
Yeah, absolutely. John, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just want to reverse back to something that Eric said about the Yorkshire stone that was put down. I just wanted to clarify that when we acquired that Yorkshire stone, a couple of issues were it was a senior officer's recommendation to use that. I believe we probably spent tens of thousands in getting it and being guaranteed that it was going to be the right substance. I think what you're saying now is has it been proved that it is wrong and that it isn't what we were sold? And if so, what can we do about that as a compensation? I mean, it's only been there 6-7 years maybe. And I just wondered why we're letting it just be run across like that. Thank you.
Well, at the time, Chairman, I did not allow it just to run across. I seriously challenged it because it soon became apparent that the stone, that the paving was breaking up. And I actually brought in samples to show to officers. And I said that this was not of the required quality. quite a lot of communication took place, and ultimately I received an email communications from a senior manager to say that they were satisfied that this paving was of good quality, and that therefore they were not prepared to continue the communications or to reopen the matter. All I can say is that it's cost us several £1,000s for a shoddy piece of work, and that when they came to do the current works on Church Slope, the intention was that the paving would be removed and would be used elsewhere. When they started to take it up, it all splintered. So you can draw your own conclusions, but that is not Yorkshire stone.
Thank you, Eric. It's a good historical issue. I've got a few indications, so I'll take them in order as I've got them. So Virginia, and then the two Nigels. Go ahead.
I would like to bear out everything that Eric has just said in the matter of the paving stone at Church Approach. I also sought a meeting at the time to ask if this was what the council had indeed ordered. Like Eric, I was told that it was, and there was no issue here for me to pursue. So we did, as local members, pursue this as best we could. We also requested, when this project was getting underway, the HAS project, that paving be reused within the project, because sustainability was of importance to us. But as it turned out, it could not be reused, which is regrettable, I agree. But I have to say local members were concerned at the time, and we did bring our concerns back to the council. I think there's just an observation as a long-standing councillor I'd like to add, and that is that actually this project, in my historical perspective, has received, I'm talking about the governance point of view that Councillor Dixon raised, has received more attention, more close attention from all members than any other project I can remember in my time as a councillor. So I'd just like to throw that in. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. That's helpful. Councillor Dixon and then Councillor Ryder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, in relation to those responses that have been made, could I ask that, I know it's retrospective in regard to this decision, but you can be sure of one thing: Overy and Scrutiny will want a breakdown of that 400,000. So can that piece of work be done, please, so that at least we can be informed retrospectively in regard to the decision that's being taken today, but there will be a need for that breakdown to be provided in some detail. So, and I think that's really in the interest of public transparency, to be honest. A paper of this type asking for this sum of money without that level of detail is not acceptable. And that should have been identified at an earlier point, I think, in this piece, in this paper coming forward. The second thing, and I did mention it, but nobody, I don't think, has commented on this, is that there must be a knock-on effect. 400,000 out of that 600,000 budget will leave 200,000, and that's an earmarked budget, earmarked reserve, the business rate retention reserve. That will have a knock-on effect elsewhere. I don't know what that is. Nothing has been stated here either, but we ought not to just forget that. This isn't just a matter of taking 400,000 and there not being any knock-on effect. So I don't know whether you want to just explain what that situation is, but we don't just take money out of one budget and transfer it to another, or to spend it in a different way than it was intended, perhaps, then without there being some other effect somewhere down the line. Some project elsewhere will be affected. So I don't think we should just ignore that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Who wants to come in first? Steve?
Well, with regards to the business rate pool reserve, historically, this is money that has been generated in terms of business rate growth at a county level through a pooled mechanism. For a number of years, that pool was held by Norfolk County Council, and the constituents districts needed to bid for a share of that money with specific projects. About 2 years ago, it was felt that there was an unnecessary level of bureaucracy involved in that project development, submission and approval process. And it was agreed by Norfolk leaders that the money would then be, there would be a percentage, I think it was 30% would be held by the county council for them to attach to economic growth projects, and the districts would each receive a share, and that money came, that 600,000 came back to North Norfolk. So there wasn't a project proposal set against that 600,000. It was placed in a reserve for decisions to be taken, and the administration is proposing that of that 600,000 that was generated in 2020-21, I think it was, that the 400,000 should be committed to the additional spending that is now required at North Horsham. It could have gone to other projects. It can go to other projects, but that isn't to say that there is any other project proposal is being deprived of this money, because no decision had been taken in respect of the money. The condition or the county agreement that it should be spent on economic or regeneration proposals, and in the context of changing financial pressures, contingency, inflationary pressures that have been discussed this morning, the proposal is made to fund the gap that exists in this project for this purpose from that budget. So it's not depriving any other project. There was no other project as yet developed for that £600,000. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
Yes, well, I'd like to thank Chief Executive for those comments. The fact that 400,000 is being taken from the business rate pool is not being taken from any other project, because no other projects have been allocated for it. But in terms of what is actually happening with construction costs and supplies, there is a knock-on effect. Just when we took £100,000 extra to repair a wall at Fakenham Connect, that has a knock-on effect, even though the money was not allocated for somewhere else, because if we continue to keep doing that, ultimately we will arrive at a situation where there is not the funding there for the capital programme. And when I was seconding this recommendation, I expressed my worries that these continually rising costs mean that the stage will be reached when the council's capital programme, not just the current programme, but what we actually want to do with new projects coming forward, including those in the levelling up bid, we just will not be able to do unless this rising cost scenario stops. It is as simple and as straightforward as that. And it is something which is of great concern to me. And in terms of this particular project, because I tend to be a hoarder of information, there is a stack of communications that have gone on about the control of the budget for this exercise and where we started in 2019-20 and where we are now. I watch it like a hawk.
Okay. Councillor Dixon, come.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful for the explanations given by both the Chief Executive and Councillor Seawood. I am relieved, I think, in one respect, that there isn't an earmark project that will now not be able to proceed in the way that was intended, perhaps. But just because there isn't actually a label on that doesn't mean to say that there isn't an effect, because there certainly is. And I think Councillor Seawood has acknowledged that. And I just don't think that I would feel comfortable in this decision being made today without some acknowledgement of that and some recognition being given to that, because this isn't just a matter of plugging a gap. This is about plugging a gap and creating potentially another gap where we would be able to deliver something within the district, but we know will not be. So I think along those lines, in principle, we just need to be cognizant of that. Thank you.
Steve.
I know Councillor Dixon's position. The decision before Cabinet this morning is to make a recommendation to full council, so it's not a final decision. So I think the concerns that you and other members have raised this morning, Councillor Dixon, can be considered and addressed within that recommendation to full council on December the 20th. For absolute clarity, there is no binding decision made at this morning's meeting. It will be a recommendation from Cabinet to full council for a subsequent endorsement and included within the capital programme or financial tables moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Was there any further indications? So the recommendation was much earlier on in the discussion, proposed and seconded by Richard and Eric. Can we have a vote of all those in favour, please? Brilliant. Is that abstention? You voting? Yeah. Sure. Okay. Thank you. And we move on to item 14 and GoGo Discover Mammoth Sculpture. That's been a bit of a mouthful to me. I've obviously we've seen this discussion develop. We can't obviously leave it where it is, and we've had this wonderful offer from Sheringham. I don't know if you'd like to, yeah, go ahead. Feel free to lead us into this. Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you. Yes, the situation is that as a part of our support for Break's GoGo Mammoth Sculpture Trail, we currently own 2 mammoths. One of them is Margaret's mammoth, who will stay at West Runton. And for those of you who don't know, Margaret is named for Steve's mother, who discovered some of the bones from the mammoth. And the other mammoth was at Cart Gap, Lumi. So Lumi presently doesn't have a home, and Sheringham Museum have very kindly offered Lumi a home. And I propose that we accept that kind offer. And that's it, really. That we donate Lumi to the Sheringham Museum, and that final arrangements are delegated, which is just where Lumi will go within that. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Liz, you wanted to speak?
I would just like to say how pleased I was to see that the beautiful Lumi, who is currently residing on a temporary or squatting basis, I'm not sure which, in Sheringham Museum, and how much the community would really love to see her there permanently. Before COVID, I did some work with Sheringham High School, and one of the things the students wanted was to have a significant landmark in Sheringham. And I think where they're looking to locate Lumi within the museum, I think that would provide that, and it would be extremely beneficial, both from an artistic point of view for our arty community, but also from the local economy. So I do hope you'll support it, because she does look absolutely beautiful in there. Brilliant. She looks very at home.
Good. Okay, thank you. That's wonderful. Councillor Dixon, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got no problem with the homing arrangement with Sheringham Museum. I just wonder whether there's any scope for including within that arrangement for Lumi to, during the tourist season, to be seen at other locations along the route. I'm just very concerned that we tend to be very Cromer, Sheringham, sometimes centric as far as that particular project is concerned. And it actually is a long stretch of coast from Cart Gap through to Weybourne. And I wonder if there is any merit in trying to include within that arrangement a loan arrangement for suitable locations for that to be exhibited during the course of the tourist season. Quite happy for it to be at Sheringham for, you know, that's its home base, if you like. But I think that it kind of has some certain affiliation, if not degree of stakeholding by other parts of that deep history coast. So really it's whether we've got any ability to include that kind of arrangement within that deal.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Virginia.
Thank you. I think that's something we can take into consideration in the future. The situation is that Lumi was in fact intended to make an appearance at Greenbuild in Fakenham, but Greenbuild didn't take place, so Lumi wasn't able to make an appearance. I'd just like to say that none of the other places along the coast have expressed interest in having Lumi, but my understanding is that the museum has said that of course Lumi might be borrowed. I should add though, Councillor Dixon, that borrowing Lumi and moving it around is not a cheap proposition because it's a heavy sculpture and it needs a very heavy proper base if it's outdoors. So it's not as simple as just putting it in a van and moving it somewhere for the afternoon. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. In my ward, we were quite grateful to host Lumi, actually. It was a welcomed addition to our coastline, specifically highlighting climate change. And had there been anywhere that I had viewed suitable to host Lumi permanently, then that would have of course been a proposition. So I welcome the safe hosting of Lumi at Sheringham, and I welcome the thought that perhaps if it was to be borrowed whilst expensive, there would be a way to facilitate that. So I will support Lumi being homed at Sheringham.
Yeah, of course. So I suppose it's not out of the realms of possible, but of course there's cost element there, and of course part of this exercise is protecting it from weather and wear elements, etc. So I suppose that's understood. Okay, and I presume we're retaining ownership of the one at West Runton, is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So the recommendations are that Lumi be donated to Sheringham Museum and delegated powers to officers to finalise arrangements, and that's proposed by Virginia. I'll be happy to second that. And all of those in favour? Yeah, okay, brilliant. Fantastic. So item 15 is support for UK 100 and ADEPT environmental initiatives. Nigel, far away.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to propose this. The reason it's come before Cabinet today is because it involves a very small change of wording to the environmental charter, which was adopted by Cabinet. So to make a change, it must come back. Page 182 of our reports this morning outline the change in red. It basically involves setting a goal of 2045 for this council to work to carbon zero across the whole district. ADEPT actually gives us access to a wide range of resources too, and government lobbying and data and collaboration with other councils. And I recommend it to council. I think it would be a good move for this council. It will open up more resources to us in our battle against climate change, and there is no cost associated with it.
Thank you, Nigel. I think this is a positive step, and why wouldn't we want to share knowledge and gain knowledge from other local authorities and partners that are in the same battle here. So I certainly would endorse what Nigel is saying. Are there any questions on this item? Okay, so the recommendations were support making the changes to the environmental charter necessary, joining the UK 100 network, and the portfolio holder signing the online form showing support for the ADEPT blueprint. So that's proposed. Is that seconded? I'll be happy to seconded by Richard, and all of those in favour, please. Yeah, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. So item 16, of course, is the exclusion of the press and public, which we must do to progress, to be able to progress to item 18. So I take a vote, I presume, on this, so that I propose that we do that, given the commercially confidential information within that item.
I don't know how much of it we would be able to discuss public.
I think so the advice is, we can do this if we can avoid speaking about things in the purple papers. I don't know how possible that is. Realistically, any thoughts?
Chair, the agenda's been put together, so the report is in public business, so the decision that you take would be informed and be able to be discussed in public. If you want to discuss the financial aspects relating to the valuation advice which exists, that would need to be discussed in part 2, private business.
Okay.
I think it's important that we actually discuss moving forward with the CPM where we are.
Sure.
In the public sector.
Okay, all right, okay, so obviously just be aware of the boundaries with this one, and if we need to move into private session, we'll do. Okay, so we move then to item 18 and the former Shanix Hotel site in Sheringham. So Philip, thank you for joining us this morning, and the information that's been provided is very useful to us, and obviously a considerable amount of work that's been undertaken by yourself over some period of time, such as this quite a difficult process and set of circumstances. Do you want to say something to introduce this item?
Thank you very much, Chairman, members. There's a small correction to the report. At para 2.3, you'll see that there is a sum of money mentioned, which is £50,000. It's an additional sum of money on top of the compensation payment. That figure should be £10,000. And you will see that that will then be consistent with the recommendation 2 held at paragraph 11.3 on page 191. So the figures should read as 10 and not 50. There is a small error in that paragraph. Chairman, the report relates to a long-standing matter, the Shanix Hotel in Sheringham. Some considerable time ago, as you're aware, members, there was a compulsory purchase order granted. We've been working through that compulsory purchase order provisions with the owner. Subsequently, the former hotel building was demolished, and we stand today at a point where an agreed extension was given to one of the triggers that related to the recommencement of the development on site. That development should have been commenced on the 23rd of November. We have no commencement on site, members, and so I'm reporting to you today on the basis of a series of options. The first option being that, having had a failure under the compulsory purchase order agreement with the owner of the site, that we should move forward at the first available opportunity to take the land into the council's control. The second option considered in the report is to demur from this first step. Members, there is a further step which is going to arrive in June 2023 that relates to the final completion of this project. So an option could be to demur until June 2023 in terms of service of the general vesting document. And then, members, the final option is to stand down the CPO process and the agreement in its entirety and take no further actions, leaving the progression of the matter entirely in the hands of the owners of the site. You'll see, members, that after discussion in the report, there is a firm recommendation that we should be pursuing the opportunity to take this site into the council's control at the first available opportunity. Members, you'll see that there has been much delay in this matter and that there has been a significant accommodation to the owners of the site to try and enable this development to move forward. The council undertook CPO in the first place as a means of applying pressure to the owner to comply with a timeline for the development to come forward. Regrettably, that has not happened, and we find ourselves in a difficult place today where I'm putting a recommendation forward to you where I would be requiring members to consider taking this site at the first available opportunity, and that this will follow with a further paper to full council requiring confirmation of the budget at the end of December. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Philip. That's very valuable. So, I did want to recognise the fact that progress was made here in terms of the building being demolished as a result of the council's work. But of course, this has been very frustrating for both us, for residents, for the community of Sheringham, who obviously would want to see, ideally in a perfect world, swift progress. That doesn't exist in these circumstances, sadly. And I suppose it's an anxiety of mine that people won't understand this CPO process, and thank goodness for them that they don't have to. Really, it's a horrible and lengthy, costly thing. So that said, we must, I think, take the opportunity to progress and bring this issue to a close for Sheringham and for the district as a whole. There's certainly value and reason for doing so. I've got an indication from Andrew and Liz, so if I could bring you in first and then I'll come to you, Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not quite sure why there isn't a cabinet member designated to this report in the papers, which I see on 187, but it falls to me as the portfolio holder for planning and enforcement, perhaps to step into that role. I'd like to thank Philip first and foremost for the report and for the work that his team and the enforcement team are doing. Just to touch on what you mentioned about the CPO process, it's a rural, if not a coastal myth in the community that the compulsory purchase procedure is fairly straightforward, that almost, we could have a meeting and make an approval, and a bit like a planning application, it's declared one day and it's able to proceed the next. And we all know that that isn't the case. There's been several government attempts to streamline the compulsory purchase order, and a bit like their agenda for planning reform, it's faltered over several years. So this kicked off back in 2014 when the first survey was done. If we do not take action and we let the order take its course, that will take us to 2024. So that's 10 years of, if you like, blight in Sheringham that this building has bestowed upon the proud town of Sheringham. So it's time, I think, to take some decisive action, which the vesting order will do, with a singular exception perhaps of demolishing the building. The owner has done very little to progress development of the site and shows no signs of doing so in the future. So I am very happy to support the recommendations in this report vis-a-vis the vesting document, and recommending to full council that we approve a budget of £10,000 to make this happen.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's great. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think blight is the right word, Andrew. But I'd like to start off with thanking the council and in particular Philip for his support and his role that he's played in a very protracted and very difficult situation. I know the community would appreciate it hugely if this CPO approval today could go forward. I think as well, we've raised the issue that people don't understand that CPO process. That has been one of the big difficulties for us in the town in helping people to understand that. So I hope as part of this, we can do something to explain that process and explain partly why it's taken so long. But I do feel it is a blight on the town. I would be very disappointed if you went for the 23 delay option, as we've already had delay after delay after delay, and it is a very significant site on the seafront, and it's very detrimental to that area of town. It's also the building next door. The gentleman who owns that building is seriously concerned about his building because he has a wall which is now exposed to the North Sea elements. So there are other issues for the surrounding properties as well. So you know, I do very much support, and the town would very much support the CPO and this recommendations going forward. So thank you very much for bringing it this far. I know it's been difficult.
Thank you, Chair. I'm more than happy to second this recommendation. I think it's incumbent on the council to actually act, and the sooner we serve the vesting document, the better. There are other landlords in North Norfolk that are similarly prevaricating. I think it's important that the council shows that we take this seriously and we have to move this forward. This is a prime site in the middle of a seaside town and it needs to be redeveloped.
Yes, absolutely agree. Okay, with that, is there any further indication?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognise the need to support and deliver effective planning enforcement. Without that, we don't have a credible planning system. As I read the paper, potentially we could commit us, or this would potentially commit us to deliver not only the CPO, but also the regeneration of the site. And my concern is whether we have fully risk assessed the implications of that action, particularly the regeneration of the site. And in particular, in light of the North Walsham has cost inflation impact and the experience that we've discussed this morning, have the costs and risks been robustly and reliably addressed in the Savills report and in any other advice that we've taken with regard to the execution of the CPO?
Okay, Philip, come in. Thank you.
Through you, Chairman, I'll be very pleased to offer some support and answers to those matters. So you'll see, members, that the report from Savills is fresh. It was deliberately prepared freshly to support this process in terms of the general vesting document. The process in terms of the council being a developer is not confirmed at this stage. The position is that the council will be looking to take the site into the council's ownership. We will work with property experts to move the matter forward. It may be, Chairman, that we return to you with further reports looking at a back-to-back project, which will be in effect limited in risk by the use of a partner developer. The risk to this CPO is very limited because there is a live extant planning permission for the redevelopment of the site for a mixed use development of residential and commercial use, which holds a significant value. So the actual risk to the council as we currently stand is very limited. And that is the professional opinion of the Savills expert who has prepared the compensation report and is facilitating and assisting the council through this process. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. You wanted to come back in, come on.
Yes, thank you. I'm reassured by that response to some extent, but I just would I would just take the precautionary approach, I guess, that I don't want to be sitting in this chamber at a later date being faced with a situation where we've got cost runaway and we're having to make some very hard decisions about how we deliver the project. And I understand that there are a range of options open to us in regard to the future, but I just think that we do need to be fully cognizant of the risks that those options run. They all have some degree of risk. I appreciate we may well have done what we can to mitigate, if you like, or forecast, foresee, however you choose to describe it, in respect of the Savills report, and I don't really have any queries with regard to that. It is just that big, that sort of high level position that once you embark on this, then you do need to see it through to the end, potentially, and that could rest with this organisation. It might not, but it could. And we need to be alive to that. And we don't want to be sitting here in the future making, as I said, difficult decisions. So we just really need to be very careful that this is the right route to take. I'm not suggesting that it isn't the right route. I'm just suggesting that there are a number of steps that we need to be very careful about before we commit ourselves. And I do understand the concept of CPOs as well and the way in which they get used. I'm not sure that I've actually seen in my time a CPO be delivered, but they are tools that we have to use from time to time. And I'm not suggesting that this is for one moment a situation that we shouldn't use that tool, but we just need to be really careful around the risks.
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just I think all of that's understood. Just one point, I think, in terms of CPOs that have been delivered by the council, there was the one in Walsingham, wasn't there? Which must have been within your time. I think that progressed some years ago now, but go ahead, Philip.
Chairman, I think it's a technical matter. That was a potential CPO. I think papers were served and there was a negotiated agreement undertaken between the property owner and the council before the CPO action was arose. It is very rare for a CPO to run its full term,
yeah,
and then for the owner not to complete in terms of the potential risk of losing their site. So this is a rare circumstance, but it is one that officers feel that the council need to follow through, and agreed with the precautionary measures mentioned by members today. Our aim is to bring that professional report back to this meeting and to ensure cabinet members are briefed throughout the process.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Yeah, such are the complexities of these matters, of course. Christopher, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Officer Rowson's probably answered a lot of the queries I actually had, so I'm not necessarily averse to the approach being taken. But there's one question I do have is that clearly the compensation sum is in purple paper, so not disclosed to the public. If this comes to full council, will that figure actually be disclosed?
It would need to be, yes.
Would need to be, okay, in terms of that. And also at the same time, would we actually then have estimated costs of what if the council worst case scenario had to take ownership and progress the project? Would we have a potential cost breakdown of what that could be? Following up the point of Councillor Dixon, this is potentially a major financial risk for the council if we were to take ownership of it. So I just think we need to be as transparent as possible about that.
Yeah, clearly, but we won't be able to do that at the December meeting. But I think that's something we will obviously have to do. Christopher, Philip, you want to come in there?
Again, Chairman, to offer assistance to members in this matter. The unknowns are so significant and complex that it would be very difficult to provide that sort of immediate oversight report. What I will be looking to bring forward is looking at the property experts' opinions and views in terms of those options that we can pursue, whether or not, in simple terms, the council build out the scheme with contractors, whether or not the council choose to limit risk with a partnership scheme, whether or not the council seek to market the scheme with permission as it currently stands. There are a number of different options within that breakdown. So to provide a clear report in terms of the overall empirical cost figure is difficult. I think we can provide risk assessments through Savills who've gone through this process with their professional expertise and bring those back to Cabinet at that later stage, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Twine, and then.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just very briefly, I think we also need to, there's obviously the risks of the project and how it's flexible, but I think we need to consider the risks of if we don't, because it takes officer time and money already in this project to get here, and if we get others that fall into that hole. So I think, as was mentioned, I think by Councillor Kershaw, that it sends a clear signal that we stand by doing the right thing by the people in this district when it's appropriate. Thank you.
I think you're right. Thank you. John Rest, go ahead.
Thank you. Really, just to sort of follow up a little bit on what Philip's saying. I think it's important, and what my colleagues are saying, that if we are going to get details of projects, we do need them detailed of where it would go, what it could do, and what the options are. And it does need to be very open and very sort of risk averse as to where we can go with it. And I think that that is the important thing, that if we are going to continue in any way, whichever way we're going to do it, we must have the full details before any decision is made on that. But I think that's really what they're trying to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. That's understood. Okay, so the recommendations were proposed by Andrew and seconded by Richard. And can we have a vote of all those in favour, please? And that's unanimous once again. So once again, Philip, thank you ever so much for bringing that paper to us, and look forward to the discussion at full council, I suppose. So everyone, thank you for your attendance today, and there being no other business, that's